Hi guys, I'm Pico. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are going to explain and simplify Django models. When you create an application in Django using the start app command, a bunch of files are created for you in the app directory, one of which is the models.py file. If you open it, you will find a commented outline that says that you can create your models here. But what does that mean? What are models and why should we create them in the first place? According to the Django docs, a model is a single definitive source of information about your data, and it contains the essential fields and behaviors of the data you're storing. Generally, each model maps to a single database table. It also says that each model is a Python class that subclasses Django.db.models.Model. In simpler terms, when we subclass the models class in Django, we're telling Django, hey Django, could you please create a table for us? So let's say I would like to create a blog website and I would like a place to store my blog posts. In that case, I would create a model called blog posts. Let me show you. All right, so over here we have an app that I've just created for the sake of this video. And as you can see, Django created the models.py file for us already. And if we open it, we will find that models are already imported for us. It says here that we should create our models. So let's delete this line and create our first model, which will be our blog post model. And like we said, it subclasses Django's models.model. All right, and now we need to define the most important parts of our model and the only required part to have, which is the fields. Every model needs at least one field. A field is basically gonna be a column in our table. So for our blog post model, we're going to need a title field, right? Because blog posts have titles. And we want to set it to a character field. Character field is perfect for when we have text with a limited amount of characters. In fact, inputting max length is a requirement. It's a required attribute. Let's set the max length of the title to 250 characters. Now for the body, of course, the body field would be where the post's body would be. And generally, that would be a large text area. So using a text field would be perfect here. So these 3 lines of code are enough for creating a table inside our database. And this table would be called blog, because that's the name of our app, _blog_post. So Django automatically creates a name for your table based on the class name that you give and the name of your application. But of course, you can override that. With Django, you can pretty much customize and override anything, pretty much, which is one of the things that make it awesome. So if you want to, for example, change the name of your table, you would override class meta and you would set db table to whatever name you want. So if you don't want your app's name to be included in the name of the table, then you could just, for example, just set it to blog posts. Although there's no reason to do that at all. So let's just delete this line of code. But it's still good to know that there is this option, right? All right, so before we do anything else, let's make migrations and see what happens. So manage.py make migrations. All right, it looks like Django created a new file for us called one_initial.py, and it should be found in the migrations directory here. So let's check. Oh, there it is. Okay, so let's go through it quickly. So over here, we have the import statement, and then we have class migration, which inherits from migrations.migration. And this is the initial migration. This is the first one for the app blog. So initial is set to true. And over here, we have a dependency list, and it's empty because This is the first migration, so this migration does not depend on any previous migrations. And over here, there is the list of operations, and in it we have our model that will be created when the migration actually happens. And as you can see, the name of the model is blog post, and there are 3 fields, which is strange because we've only defined 2 fields. We've defined only the title field and the body field. However, there are 3 fields. That's because Django by default adds an ID field if you do not define a primary key field. And this ID field acts as a unique identifier for each record in your table. All right, so now how about we run the migrate command? So py manage.py migrate. Okay, and now the migrations were applied. So in our database, we should now have a blog table. So now would be a great time to gain access to Django's built-in admin so that we can manage our database. So to access it, we're gonna need to create a super user. So let's do that. The command for creating a super user is py manage.py create super user. Okay, let's hit enter. Okay, it's asking me for a username. I'm gonna leave blank to use Pico, but you can use, of course, any username you want. I'll leave the email address blank too. And for the password, I'll make it 1 letter. Okay, I'll type in that letter again. Okay, now it's telling me that the password is too short. However, I can bypass password validation and create the user anyway, and I will do that by hitting Y and then enter. Okay, now the super user was created successfully. So let's run server again. So py manage.py run server. Okay, and now let's open our website and head to admin by typing /admin. Okay, now we'll type in the username and the password. Okay, and here is the admin interface. It doesn't have our blog model. And that's because in order to see models in Django's administration, we need to register them. And to do that, we just need to add a couple of lines of code, or even maybe just 1 line of code in admin.py. Okay, so that's where we register our models, just like this line says. Okay, so in order to do that, we are going to use Django admin, which is already imported for us. So admin.site.register. And now in order to register our model, we should import it first. So from models, we want to import blog post. Okay, and now that we have it, let's register it. Okay, so blog post. All right, and now if we refresh, we should see our blog model. Oh, there it is. Okay, so that's blog, the name of our application, and blog posts, that is the name of our model. Now, what if we want to see a different name here? Like we want to change the name displayed in the admin interface and how our model is referred to. However, we don't want to change the definition of our model. What we can do is go back to class meta and add verbose name that we want. So let's say we want our model to be called post instead of blog post, right? Now, if we refresh, the name is different, right? And as you can see, Django makes it plural. We initially called our model blog post, but in the admin, it showed as blog posts. And here we made the verbose name post but in the admin it shows posts, right? So another thing we could override if we wanted to is the verbose name plural. We could decide on a plural name because, by the way, Django doesn't know how to make irregular nouns plural. It just adds an s to any noun, right? So a lot of the time you would have to specify a verbose name plural. Now we could just make it posts, or if we want to see a difference, you could just make it many posts, for example. And if we refresh, here it is. Now our plural version of the name is many posts. Of course, you could make it anything you want. Now, let's see what happens if we try to add a post. Let's make a post and call it blog post 1. Hello world. And the body, let's make it hi. I am a blog post body. So let's save it. Okay, and now if we look here, it says blog post object 1. All right, so I don't like that our blog object is just called blog post object 1. That's because by default, Django names objects based on the model's name and the ID, as you can see. But of course, it would be much better to give our object a more indicative name, right? That would be much more user-friendly. So what we can do is define a string method. The string method allows us to set a human readable representation of our model. And it's highly recommended to always remember to set a string method for your models because that would allow you to much easier debug. It would make using shell easier, the admin easier. So try to remember to define it. So in this case, I think it would be cool to have our blog posts represented by the blog title. So let's return self.title. Okay, and that should do it. So let's refresh. Yes, now we see our title. All right, so another field that is very, very useful and you would probably want to use a lot is the date and time field. So let's say you want to track when a blog post is made. Then you would want to use models.DateTimeField. And if you want the date to be added automatically when a post is created, you could set auto now add to true. So this will add the date whenever you create a blog post and save it. Now, another very useful thing to add is updated at field, and we're also going to use the model date time field, but this time we'll use auto now instead. And auto now is also amazingly useful because it updates the field to the current date and time every time the object is saved. So now in order for these fields to get added to our database, we are gonna need to make migrations again and then migrate. So py manage.py make migrations. So because we already have rows in our database, or at least one row, one post that we have made, Django is complaining to us. It's telling us that it doesn't know what to do because we said that we wanted each post to have a created at field where the created at time should be added whenever a post is created. But we already have a post, and this post does not have a value for created at. So it's giving us two options. It's asking us to either provide a one-off default now that will be set on all existing rows, or quit and manually define a default value in models.py. We can select an option. Okay, so I would like to provide a one-off default now. So let's select option 1. Okay, so Django is very nicely telling us that we can accept the default time zone now by pressing enter, or we can provide another value if we want. Okay, I think that time zone now is fine. So when we hit enter, the value of created at would be set to now. I hit enter and it looks like Django created a new file for us in the migrations folder, and it called it alter blog post options. Okay, so let's look at it. Here we have our dependency array, and it has the first migration we made as a dependency. And over here, we have the operations array. And this time, there's more than one operation in it. We have the alter model options, because we've changed the verbose name and the verbose name plural, and we've added the field created at and the field updated at. Okay, so I think everything looks good. So let's migrate. So manage.py migrate. Okay, this is cool. All right, so now let's run our server again. Okay, and let's go back to our admin, and let's see if we can see the created at. We cannot, but if we wanted to see it, we could so easily go back to our admin.py file, and we would subclass ModelAdmin like this. So we would create class blog post admin, and we want to subclass admin.ModelAdmin, and then we want to set list display to, let's say, title and created at. And now we need to register class blog post admin as well. So let's just add it here. Okie dokie. All right, so now if we refresh, we should see it. Oh, I made a typo. Okay, so now if we refresh, we should see it. Okay, there it is. Created at. We have the date. Now, how about we create another post? Let's call it post to bam. And let's save it. Okay, so both posts have the created at. And as you can see, the newer post is showing first, right? But if we want, we could change the ordering of our posts. We could choose to change the way they are ordered in the admin.py, so the ordering will change in the admin only, or we could change how they are ordered in the database itself. So let's say we want to order our posts based on the date of creation. So we could set ordering to created at. And now if we refresh, the older post should show up on top. Okay, there it is. Okay, if you want to order in descending order, show newer posts first, then all you gotta do is add a dash before the created at. A dash would make it get arranged in descending order. So let's try, let's refresh. Yep, there you go. Okay, so how about we also see how updated at would look like. So let's go back to admin.py and let's add updated at to list display. Okay, and let's refresh. Okay, so it looks like the updated at and the created at by default are the same, right? So let's try to edit post 2. Let's remove the body section. Let's just delete it, keep it empty, and let's try to save. It says that there is an error and that this field is required. And that's because by default, Django does not allow fields to be blank. But if you want fields to be allowed to be blank, you can set blank to true. And now let's try it. Let's refresh and let's try to leave the body field blank and let's save. And it worked. It was saved successfully. And as you can see, the updated ad was changed. Okay, so right now our blog posts don't have an author. So let's add an author field. And we want the author to be whichever user is logged in, right? And we want each user to be able to create more than one post. And for that, we're going to create a many-to-one relationship between our blog post model and the user model. All right, so in order to do that, the first thing we want to do is import the user model. So from Django.contrib.auth.models import user. Okay, and now that we have our user model imported, which is, by the way, the default user model that is created for you when you create a Django project. Now that we have it imported, we can just create the relationship here. As we said, we want a many-to-one relationship. To do that, we just type in models.ForeignKey, and over here we just add the model that we want to establish a relationship with, and in that case, it's the user model. And then it is common practice to add in what happens when the model that we've just added is deleted. How about on delete models.cascade? And that would make it so that if you delete a user, the blog posts associated with that users would also get deleted too. That way you won't have any orphaned blog posts without an author. All right. So now let's see what happens if we make migrations. So py make migrations. Okay, let's hit enter. All right, so Django is telling us that it is impossible to add a non-nullable field author to blog post without specifying a default. And that's because we've already created blog posts and they don't have an author field. So we need to resolve this issue. Django is giving us options like it did before. So we could provide one off default now, or we could quit and manually define a default value in models.py. This time around, I would like to choose option 2, and I would like to define a default value in models.py. So let's do that. So an easy way to set the default user is using the ID. So I'm just going to set default to 1. That means the default user would be the user with the ID 1. And that would typically be the first user you ever create. And in that case, this user would be the Pico super user we've created together because that's the first user we've made. Now let's make migrations again and see what happens. Okay, let's hit enter. Okay, now there are no complaints, and if we look at our migrations directory, we find that there's a third file created, and it has the operations. Okie dokie, now let's migrate. Okay, so now the migrations are applied. Now let's run server. All right, so now let's revisit our admin page. Of course, we will not be able to see the user. If we want to see it, then we could go back to admin.py and see what happens if we add author to list display. Okay, let's refresh. Okay, check it out. Author Pico. We did it, you guys. Yay. All right, so we have covered some of the basics, and I hope that you now feel more equipped to work on your own projects. If you'd like me to make more videos on the topic of models in Django, please let me know in the comments, as there is still so much more to expand on. And if you have any questions, suggestions, anything at all, please type that down in the comments as well. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Thank you for watching. Have a lovely day. Bye.